I feel like America's foreign policy should be more along lines with what President Trump has said, America first. We should protect is the United States Constitution that says that Congress is the only body in our government that has the authority to declare.
And what do you have to say about whose nomination has gone through so much of controversy as Secretary of Defense?
Look, I believe Pete Hegseth is a changed man. Anybody in their early 20s that is in the military knows that when you are young and full of testosterone and ready to...
Tell me, how much of the reality is really covered and shown in the media?
I think the media coverage of war has changed. You think of the footage from the old Vietnam or Korea War, and it was...
Veterans have from President Trump's administration, and what kind of changes you think might be in effect?
I think that we are going to bring our troops home. And that's the name of our organization, Bring Our Troops Home. I think we're going to see...
Hi, Dan. Thank you so much for joining Gold Media. It's a privilege to have you on our podcast today. And 13 years into U.S. military, Army, National Guard, thank you so much for your service to this nation.
You bet. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate the kind words.
So Dan, what is it that you feel strongly about when it comes to national security?
No, absolutely. I think the United States has gotten into this business of inserting ourselves into foreign policy of other nations where it just doesn't have a direct interest for the United States of America. I believe that a United States foreign policy in the defense of our country should be just that. The defense of our country, and we shouldn't be on these wars of choice all around the world. And a good example of this is our recent military engagements in Syria, where the President of the United States sought authorization to go to war in Syria, and Congress told him no, and he went anyway. And it's just an example of how the United States has this incredible overreach in sections of the world that have no bearing on a direct threat to our homeland. And so I feel like America's foreign policy should be more along lines with what President Trump has said, America first. We should protect our interests first, focus on our people and our security, and be a shining city on the hill, an example for the rest of the world, and not imposing our will on their own sovereign nation.
Absolutely. And according to you, what kind of policies and procedures or bills should really Congress be approving to make sure that the troops are deployed only when it's absolutely necessary?
That's such a great question, because our founding fathers of our country, they spent more time on this issue than any other issue when they were creating our founding documents. They wanted to make sure that we had a civilian control and a brake check on our military, so that the civilians were in charge of our military, and that the representatives of the people, our Congress, voted on any declaration of war before our country engaged in war. So I don't know that our federal government needs to pass any bills to change the way our military is used. I think we just need to follow the ones we have. And the most important one is the United States Constitution that says that Congress is the only body in our government that has the authority to declare war. And if we can just follow that, we would end a lot of our foreign policy problems. But we've gotten away from it. Congress hasn't declared war since 1942 in World War II, but we've been in Korea, Vietnam, Desert Storm, Grenada, Panama, Afghanistan, Yemen, Syria, all across the Horn of Africa. We fought these wars that Congress hasn't declared. And so we decided, our organization, which is a veterans organization made up of veterans from the global war on terror, it's called Bring Our Troops Home. We've decided we're going to go to the states, to the legislatures of the states, and help fix the United States foreign policy by interposing the states in between the federal government and the National Guard. And so that's what we work on, is a bill called Defend the Guard. And it's a state-based legislation where the state of Michigan, for example, if they pass this bill, they would be able to tell the federal government, you're not taking our National Guard to go fight a war in Djibouti, Africa, unless Congress has first declared war. And if we can do that at the state level and reclaim a little bit of authority over our foreign policy at the state level, we have more leverage as citizens of the United States than we would if we went to Washington, D.C. and tried to lobby Congress.
Right. So how do you think Defend the Guard Act would be relevant in Trump's administration, and what kind of attention it's going to probably get?
Oh, I love that question. We've been working on this bill since 2019, is when our organization took up the charge on this bill. And we did it because the Trump administration was saying things that spoke to our soul. He was talking about ending these stupid wars, these endless wars of choice, these regime change wars. He was talking about ending them, but he was being blocked by his own administration. His own Secretary of Defense and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff was lying to him about pulling troops out of Yemen, for example. And so the Trump administration now is made up of supporters of this Defend the Guard legislation. Trump is speaking the language, and then he's hired or appointed a Secretary of Defense in Pete Hegseth, who has already endorsed the bill. And last January on Fox News, he said, "I love this idea," when New Hampshire House of Representatives passed it. And then I met with him down in West Palm Beach last month and talked to him about Defend the Guard, and he reiterated his support for Defend the Guard. And then Tulsi Gabbard, who was just appointed or just nominated and went through her appointment confirmation hearing for Director of National Intelligence, she has endorsed the bill. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Health and Human Services Secretary, has endorsed the bill. So there's all these members of the new incoming Trump administration who are America First foreign policy type people that we believe think like us. And so we know there's support inside the administration for this type of effort. And as a recent example, Trump's been in office for 2 weeks. In the last 5 days, we've had 3 major legislative victories for Defend the Guard in Wyoming, South Dakota, and Virginia, where between those 3 states, this bill was presented in the state legislatures, and combined, there was only 1 single negative vote in all 3 states. And so the bill is progressing. It's already passed the Arizona Senate. It's passed the Idaho Senate. It's passed the New Hampshire House of Representatives. And it's passed legislative councils and committees in Montana, Wyoming, South Dakota, Virginia. We even got it on the ballot in Texas last year in the primary election last March. And the Republican voters of the state of Texas supported Defend the Guard with 83% of the people voting in support of it. It even outperformed Donald Trump in Texas. So it's a movement that is growing legs and it's catching fire all across the country.
Absolutely. And what do you have to say about Pete, whose nomination has gone through so much of controversy as Secretary of Defense?
Look, I believe Pete Hegseth is a changed man. Anybody in their early 20s that is in the military knows that when you are young and full of testosterone and ready to fight and go anywhere in the world, your mindset changes, because once you go to those battles, once you've served in those wars, once you've pulled the trigger and felt the snap of a bullet flying by you and seen your men die around you, it changes you. It changes you deeply. And I believe Pete has gone through a personal conversion over the last few years with the his marriage to Jenny and his conversion to Christianity and his belief in God. I think he's a changed man, and he believes in the just war principles that so many philosophers, really good religious philosophers and political philosophers throughout history believe in. And I think Pete believes this more than anything. America's military should be lethal, they should be professional, and they should be restrained. So if we do need to fight a war that is for America's interest, it should only be done with the proper authority from Congress. And when we do fight it, we fight it with the proper amount of force. We go in and win, and we come right back home. We don't set up these military police actions and nation building experiments that take decades.
Absolutely. And then talking about testosterone, many youths around us, we see 17, 18, 19 years old, they just want to join military, and some of them do join, but then they don't sustain there. So what do you have to tell them or give them an advice?
Absolutely. All of us that I joined the Marine Corps when I was 18 years old, and I wanted one thing. I wanted to go to war. And that's why we have wise civilian control of the military, because if every 18 to 24-year-old male full of testosterone had their choice, they would run headlong into every war and every adventure they could find. And they would do it out of a sense of adventurism, of machismo, of patriotism. But that's why we have civilian control of the military that decides when our nation goes to war. We want our military to be trained, equipped, and ready to go, so that if we are attacked or we do have a substantial threat, we know we have the best fighting force in the world to put an end to that conflict. And so to all the young men and women in the military that do have this desire to go to war, I pray that you never have to. But if you do, my job now as a civilian and a veteran is to get the policies and the bureaucrats out of the way so that when you do go, you have the best equipment, you have the best opportunity, you have the best definition of success, and you have a clear and concise mission.
Thank you so much for that, Dan. And you have been deployed in so many places, like what, as a troop, as someone who is supervising the troops and all. Tell me, how much of the reality is really covered and shown in the media?
I think the media coverage of war has changed. You think of the footage from the old Vietnam or Korea War, and it was America watched the TVs every night to see the names of the people that had died in war, and now we have reporters embedded with us. And so you see what's on the news, I would say, is pretty accurate, but I think America now is jaded and scarred, and they don't even understand that we've been at war now for 24 years straight. There are people in the military who were born after the war started and have left the military, and the war is still going on. There is a generation of young Americans that know nothing but war. And so I think that the coverage that we get is very filtered now. The footage, when it is shown, is much more graphic than ever before. But I think that Hollywood and video games and the way we purport war in the media is romanticized. It's glamorized. It's not exactly what it is. And so you see great documentaries about the war, like I'm trying to remember the name of it, the Korengal Valley documentary that shows the real atrocities of war. And if you really were to show that to mainstream America, we would be much less prone to go to war. And that's why it's so important that we have Congress has that break, right? They have the ability to declare war, because when Congress votes to declare war, that is the informed consent of the American people that is giving the military that support. And then every single zip code in America gets behind the war effort. And I believe that our wars would be shorter, they would be less brutal, they would be more clearly defined. But I don't think the media does a great job of showing the true emotion or the cost of war on the human soul.
Right. So what kind of expectation you as a veteran have from President Trump's administration, and what kind of changes you think might be in effect?
I think that we are going to bring our troops home. And that's the name of our organization, Bring Our Troops Home. I think we're going to see troops massive redeployment back to the United States from places like Djibouti, Africa, or all across the Horn of Africa, from the Middle East. I think we're going to start seeing some of our bases in other countries like Germany being retracted and drawn down. I think that with this expansion and this purchase of Greenland, I think we're going to see our Navy submarine bases in Europe moving back to American territory, so we can still control the Northern Atlantic from an American base instead of doing European bases. I also think that we're going to see more surgical strikes if we do need to go to war, because I don't think President Trump believes in deploying hundreds of thousands of troops into a conflict where the enemy is not even a nation state. It's a small tribe of terrorists. Right. So if we do need to go to war, I think President Trump is going to be much more restrained, much more tactful, and he's going to do it in an economical sense, meaning the cost of lives and dollars. He has no interest in bearing U.S. blood or treasure in foreign soil. And then secondly, I think that we're going to see the use of the National Guard, which is the militia of the states, used even more for domestic missions such as border security, right? And repelling the invasion at the southern border, or dealing with the recent incursion at the northern border, where a border agent was recently killed by an illegal crosser. We're going to see the National Guard helping clean up our homeland and defending American interests and American lives.
Absolutely. Dan, on that note, are you up for a quick rapid fire with Gold Media?
Of course.
Bring it on. What's the most challenging part of a soldier's life?
Of a soldier's life, I would say being away from home. When you're deployed, you're gone from your family for extended periods of time.
Right. What's the first thing that comes to your mind when you hear war or a war-like situation?
War is a racket.
Absolutely. What's the best advice a fellow service member has probably given you?
Remember who you are. Keep your powder dry and your head down.
That's a good one. What's your ready-to-eat meal when you are in a crisis as a soldier?
My favorite MRE would be probably cheese tortellini.
Wow. What's one skill that you've learned in the military and want everybody to adopt?
Leadership. In the military, we learn a couple things. When you're a non-commissioned officer, you learn that leaders eat last. We don't treat ourselves to the finer things in life until our men and women that serve under us have those things. And we don't mess with three things with your people. You never mess with their time, their money, or their families. If they have an issue with one of those three things, we solve it now. And I think every business leader, every cultural leader, and every political leader could learn that lesson.
Wow, that's a good one. What's the best advice you'll give it to someone who is really passionate about joining military?
Do your homework. Recruiters lie.
What does a Veterans Day mean to you personally?
We have a joke in the veteran community, and I'm going to apologize. Veterans Day is free fajita day. We can go to any restaurant in America and get free fajitas, but what we really want isn't a free meal. We don't want to see a yellow ribbon tied on a tree. We want fewer of our brothers coming home in flag draped boxes.
Absolutely. Dan, thank you so much for connecting with Gold Media, and thank you so much for your selfless service to this nation and this country and saving all of us.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. And if anybody would like to learn more, follow us on X at @TroopsHomeUS or at defendthegard.us or bringourtroopshome.us. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Absolutely. And subscribe to Gold Media.
Please do. Hey, this Friday, February 7th from 6 to 9 p.m., I will be in Michigan at the 10th Amendment Awards Washington Day fundraiser benefit. It's in honor of Senator Jonathan Lindsay in Michigan for his work as a United States soldier, former Green Beret soldier, and supporter of the Defend the Guard movement. To find out more, go to grandnewpartypack.com. That's GNPpack.com for your tickets.